Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing fine, thank you. We're going to talk about one of our least favorite organizations ever.
Yeah.
And a person, a doctor, very famous because he was associated, although he was not the kingpin, but he made the most money. The organization we're going to talk about is the CDC. Matter of fact, they haven't given up. They haven't backed down. The people are sick and tired of the CDC. They're sick and tired of Fauci. They're sick and tired of vaccines. But, you know, their strategy now is don't give up, don't give up. They're very determined. So they're trying to figure out a way. How can we force, with a gun point, to give this vaccine to little kids?
Yeah.
Oh, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. They don't use force. And they didn't use force, you know, on lockdown.
Yeah.
All they did was they made a recommendation, and everybody followed suit because there was ways to punish you if you didn't do it. So the states loved, and then the federal government can say, oh, we don't violate First Amendment rights, and we don't violate this. This is all voluntary. Well, they're playing that same game now because they're bound and determined to find a way to get around morality, the law, and ethics, and get those shots into those kids. And it's sickening.
Yeah.
But the CDC is going to vote today to put it in with the group of vaccines that the kids take routinely, and they're going to do this, and they're not going to mandate. And they're not going to have a vote and say, yes, every kid before he can go to school will have to have the vaccine for COVID. I don't think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to say, oh, it's an important thing, and we're going to recommend it.
Yeah.
We'll recommend it to the states and the drug companies. You know, the drug companies even backed off. We're never going to make something that we're going to test.
Yeah.
This way they don't have to test it, and we talked a little bit about that. If you don't have to test it, then they have more license to do whatever they want. But that'll come up, and so we'll be watching that vote. But this is something that sort of fits into my concern and your concerns, and a lot of people's concern is how disruptive this is to the medical profession. And as some have pointed out, and Chuck Baldwin points it out, that it's a real attack on the privacy of the ministers and the churches. And of course, closing down churches wasn't exactly free speech, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, these are tools that they use. This is an excuse, and right now today, it'll be when it's written out, it'll sound good, but there's already a nice little debate going on between the CDC and Tucker Carlson, which Tucker defended himself rather well.
Yeah. You know, this is sneaky and evil because, as you say, the CDC says, well, we didn't mandate anything. We don't mandate anything. We simply made a recommendation. But everyone, you know, says, well, we hold CDC standards. We're up to CDC standards. So they want to have it both ways. Just like we talked about Fauci the other day. He said, I had nothing to do with lockdowns. And then there's 50, clips of him saying, we got to lock it down. He also said, I had nothing to do with school closures. Yeah, he didn't stand in front of the school with the gun and say it's closed down, but it's the same thing. Let's put up this first JPEG, and this is something from Zorhedge. CDC set to add COVID-19 vaccines to childhood immunization schedule. They're voting on it today, as we discussed earlier this week. And as you suggested, when Tucker Carlson did a segment on this saying they're going to force this vax on your kids, the CDC pushed back and said, no, this is totally incorrect. This is fake news. And Tucker had a good comeback on that. And let's actually, that video clip, if we can put that up and play, I think the first 55 seconds of that, and listen to Tucker. He makes a doggone good comeback to the claims. Here we go. Let's listen to this for
I want to bring you now an update that we think is important on a story we told you about last night. The CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices was on the verge of adding the COVID vaccine to the childhood immunization schedule. That vote is scheduled for tomorrow. Now, as we said, if that vote passes, children will be forced to take the shot they do not need, no scientific basis for acquiring it, and the shot that could hurt them. They have to take that shot in order to be educated in the United States in a public school. Well, in response to our segment, The CDC complained on Twitter. They claimed that states, and not the CDC, establish vaccine requirements for school children. But like so much else that we have heard from the CDC, and it pains us to say this, but it's true. Like so much else they have told us over the last 2 years, they're lying. And they know they're lying. More than a dozen states follow the CDC's immunization schedule to set vaccination requirements, not suggestions, requirements for children to be educated. For example, the Virginia...
So as Tucker says, they're lying and they know they're lying. They indeed intend to mandate these for every kid. And the states do voluntarily, most states do voluntarily say, oh, we adhere to CDC guidelines because they come down from on high.
You know, this brings up the subject that I talk about a lot, and that is lying.
Yeah.
And, you know, right now, if you think about what's happening in medicine and the Hippocratic Oath and abortion and all these things, it's so far removed. And it is lying. And Fauci, you just opened the program by Fauci lying, flat lying. And here the CDC's lying. But the only way that I really understand this is that they're not lying because there isn't such a thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. If you lie, you could be guilty of something, but they're exempt. So therefore, they're just telling their truth, and their job is to get people inoculated and for drug companies to make money. But they do not see that it's lying, and that of course that's part of the nihilism of a society. And I think that's our system today. Whether it's in economics or war, we had to listen to all the lies about why we had to go to war, and it means that the people are too gullible. And it's amazing that they're so bold as to come up with this after all the tragedy that's ongoing. You know, we backed off. Some people say, well, I don't see too many people with masks anymore. I see too many, but I see too many and hear too many, and we talk about too many of the tragic consequences of the vaccine.
Well, let's go to a couple of tweets because we can always turn to these gentlemen, I think, to give us some wisdom. This first one is from Senator Paul, and he's responding to news on the 18th, which is yesterday. The Moderna CEO says most people don't need COVID boosters, and young people should consider not getting the shot, and I'll add, at all. So here's a CEO saying this, and Senator Paul says, with even big pharma tempering their enthusiasm for mandating COVID vaccines on young people, will Fauci enthusiasts at CDC still vote to mandate COVID vax on kids? Good question. He follows up with another scorcher, if we can put this up. And he's commenting on an article saying that the CDC will vote today to add this. And they had a preliminary vote, which was 15-0 to add it. And Senator Paul says, this is the same committee that approved booster vaccines for children, despite no evidence that COVID boosters reduce transmission, hospitalization, or death among children. Appalling, says Senator Paul. And then Congressman Thomas Massie, also from Kentucky, joins in, and he makes a great point. This is from the CDC, and it's a little difficult to see down there, but it talks about myocarditis in kids 5 to 11 is less than kids in adolescence as a result of the vax. And Thomas Massie says, so the CDC's pitch for giving COVID shots to children ages 5 to 11, you'll get less myocarditis from these shots than your older sibling did. And that's awfully encouraging.
But you know, it's not a mandate. And that's where they think they can get away with it. But there's still enough people, thank goodness, that we have a few people speaking out, and Tucker does a pretty good job, and we have a couple senators speaking out, and we have to call attention to it because once again, I think it's powerful. But truth is powerful, and even when the mob is out there doing things because they're a mob, the truth is still worthwhile. It's the only thing you have left in this mob psychology stuff, and I would think that. If we just work hard at this, that we can win these battles and not let them do it. But right now, this particular vote isn't involved in the election. The election yes, it has a little to do with lockdowns, but things are better there. So they're going to pass over that. And this is not going to be a deciding factor, but it has to be pointed out that when they're flat out lying, that it's a lie and not just pass it on to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what you call it if you tell a lie and it's not a lie. It's a lie.
A white lie.
Yeah, a real one.
Yeah.
They should be responsible for it too.
Well, this kind of is the backdrop for why we have somewhat of an unusual title, because that title was borrowed from a piece that our friend Chuck Baldwin, a pastor, wrote a couple years ago that you said you've been reading it and thinking about it for quite a while. And it's actually so apropos what's happening today with this vote. And it's pastors and physicians from protectors to predators. He wrote it in 2020, but it's so important, I think, to look back. And you had some thoughts on this.
Well, yes, because he touches on a subject that I'm very interested in, and he applies it to the pastors, and he is one. And what happened during the lockdown, you know, people couldn't go to their churches, and there's limitation. And the idea that your conversation, he emphasized that, your conversation with the doctors and the ministers, it's no longer sacred. You know, they can find out or lock you down or close the building. And this to me is a real attack from my viewpoint, the doctor-patient relationship, because it's the government that becomes the dictator, and they're going to decide what they can hear. This whole thing, the best symbolism for how ridiculous this is the concept of natural immunity. You know, natural immunity has been around for I guess hundreds of years, and it's well known. It was taught in all the medical schools, and there's a lot of very good doctors that still, defend that, because it proved that those who argued, the argument was so strong that even the CDC had to, tip around it now, because they know it's true. We've had people at the CDC say, yeah, it's true. Fauci in the old days, when he was before Fauci, and he would say, well, if you've had the flu, you're immune. You don't have to take it. And here, what do we do with all this garbage that we're going through? That the people who follow all these rules actually have a much greater chance of being sick. So it doesn't follow the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. And in this case, they're doing harm and then lying about it. And that is what we're witnessing today in another vote. But the whole thing, you have to. I can recall at a time when I was in medicine still, that when people started to visit with me on very private things, I quit writing them down, because I had to sign the paper too often, people subpoenaing the doctor's record. So the very personal things, I didn't want to write that down, and now it makes no difference, because every single thing a doctor does, every prescription he writes immediately is in a federal register. It's recorded at the federal government. So this is far cry. The parents have lost a lot of authority in talking about the medical care for their children. These surgeries that changes the sex of a child, it's atrocious, it's vicious, it's criminal, and the people who do that ought to be in prison. I mean, this is vicious. I was thinking, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, or earlier than that, we were staunch. We were the protector of the innocent girls, in a primitive country. They were doing child mutilation, on sexual organs. And now look at what they do.
They do
It's just terrible. So I can imagine why Chuck, somebody I know and respect, why he was back then. He's still talking and trying to promote, the principles of privacy, and he sees the similarity about why there should be privacy with the doctor and the patient, and a minister attending to his churchgoers.
We had beautiful weather yesterday, and I took a little walk, and I was talking with my wife, and I said, reflecting back, COVID did ruin everything, because it ruined the illusion that we live in a flawed but fundamentally just and rational society. You know, that was all been completely undermined and turned on its head. We had thought once that if we just work on some of the flaws, we could move toward a more perfect society. But the reality is all of the institutions and the people that we counted on to perform their functions, albeit as flawed humans, they completely betrayed us. And I think reading what Pastor Baldwin says here brings that home. He says, and he starts the essay with, historically society has deemed pastors and physicians as two of the most sacred callings. Pastors watched over our souls, while physicians watched over our bodies. And we could add to that other, aspects of society and the state. They all had a role. And the thing that I think that COVID did, how it ruined everything, is it turned all of that upside down and revealed it for the lie that it was, I guess. And society fell apart.
And what they destroyed was privacy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to summarize it, and they've used the issue of privacy to justify for all these years the killing of a live fetus, a live baby, a day before birth.
Yeah.
And even this, it's still going on like that. So that is destroyed, and it also flows over into how you deal with the people who need physical protection in the law enforcement agencies. We've talked a lot about the FBI and the CIA, and the best advice that most people get now is not don't get involved with immediately thinking the FBI and just think of all these trials going on, and they turn into sort of like a kangaroo court, and they convict people on this, and it's strictly the loss of confidence, loss of trust, and people, just are void of any effort to, tell the truth and think it's very important. And we have to put a qualifier in there because we're appealing to expand the number of people who agree with us and not them, because they're out there and they've just been very frustrated. And if more and more people would speak out, and I just say to people who are inclined to agree, speak out, because you don't know how many people you'll influence, because that's a secret and you can't even count them, but you got to speak out.
Yeah, exactly. And now here's going back to 2020, a couple of the important points that Baldwin made. He said, many physicians have been on vacations for months. Hospitals are still refusing to see patients. We remember this. He said, in fact, physicians and hospitals are being paid by the federal government to not treat people. Doctors betrayed people. They betrayed their oath. But he doesn't let the pastors off. He talks about the churches being empty and the pastors being AWOL. And he said, as I said from the very beginning of this nonsense, none of it could have happened without the sheepish submission of America's pastors. And he goes on to talk about how pastor has been characterized as a shepherd, shepherding his people. And during this time, the shepherds abandoned their flocks.
And this whole effort that went on and continues to go on is setting the conditions and the psychological benefits of saying we have to go with it. The government is our shepherd, and we have to rely on the government because they pay the bills and they protect us and take care of us, and they're not even going to send us a bill for the vaccine.
Yeah.
But it is control. It's a major step in the direction of a weaponizing and a socialized medical care program, and that control is outside of medicine. It's already in the ministry and in law enforcement, and so it is a serious problem. And that's why I think if we continue to be involved in this issue, we won't get bored with nothing to talk about.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, more corruption, and we can go to the next clip because this is in another area. And this is from Responsible Statecraft, written by Connor Eccles. Defense contractors eye long-term profits from Ukraine war. Excuse me. A new proposal would slash protections against price gouging and ratchet up weapons production well past Kiev's needs. And this is a danger. Let's put on this next one because it's bipartisan, as is all of this military spending. Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, and Jim Inhofe, neocon Republican from Oklahoma, proposed a new amendment to this year's NDAA. And I've highlighted this. the proposal would give the Department of Defense wartime powers that would free it to buy huge amounts of artillery and other munitions using multi-year contracts. And you made the point, Dr. Paul, and so I pulled up the Constitution. And let's look at this next clip because it's very, very clear. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12, Congress shall have power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years.
I think they think they're getting around it. Morally, they're not getting around it with it, and I'm sure constitutionally they're not getting around with it, because even if they're saying, well, we have to be prepared for war and this sort of thing, well, war has to be declared before you prepare for it and start fighting it. And I think when you read about this stuff, it sort of reminds you of the saying, perpetual war for perpetual peace. And yet you get no peace, and the wars continue, and then you have to go around, as we were advised a long time ago, that we shouldn't be doing this, looking around for monsters to destroy so that we have an enemy. And just look at what we're doing there. Right now, thank goodness, the people, we talked yesterday about this, the people are getting a little bit frustrated about the monsters we sort of helped create, and that we've been fighting and spending billions of dollars in Ukraine, and at the same time we're ready to send money and get involved in a conflict with China and Taiwan, and sending vessels around the world. But like I've said so many times, it's limited, because this is exactly what has been done throughout history when the empire becomes weakened. The weaker it gets, the more they do this, but they got weak because they were doing it, and because they depended on, of course, inflation. And you say, well, that wasn't happening back there. No, all the way back to Roman times, that is exactly what did the same thing there. Is an immoral system, lying to the people. They lied to you about the money. They lied to you about medical care and the whole works. So this is I think a way of sort of putting it in writing that this is perpetual and live with it, and at least it's very obvious this was not meant to be by our founders. That, oh well, this is a pretty good deal. Let's just do it. Let's just set it up that for the next 10-year plan, you can have all the weapons you want. They wouldn't even have to come back and get the authorization. It looks like to me.
Yeah.
As long as they pass that. So even if they didn't, even if they argue, well, we didn't actually take the money out, but it looks like it's been authorized, and they appropriate money and spend it all the time anyway. If you look at how much the Federal Reserve is involved in their financing, we do so much of that. Part of the big problem that we have.
And what it means is they're going to open the spigot full blast and just let the money roll out, and unless Americans challenge them on this, it's going to stop. And that's why, we talked earlier today about our show yesterday, where we kind of optimistically said, well, Kevin McCarthy from California, if he becomes the next speaker, he might be a little more hesitant to sending over billions of dollars in Ukraine. Well, you and I both question whether that will actually happen. We know, you were saying before the show that, he's kind of feeling which way the wind is blowing. We talked about several different polls showing Americans are not that enthusiastic at all about sending billions overseas to Ukraine. And he's testing it, but when he gets in, probably he's hoping to be business as usual.
It's amazing how the first anti-spending in military pops up a week or two before the election, when the people are starting to say, how long are you going to stay over there? I think they're smart enough to put it together that, they're short money. They can't pay for the food and all this. Why are we sending it over? The other thing is why do we provide such wonderful care for people who are trespassers? The trespassers come in, they get places to live, they get their tents and sometimes their hotel, and they always have a bag of groceries with them or something, but they're not they're not ignored. And of course they say you people aren't very compassionate. Well, I think compassion sometimes means that you put some responsibility on people. Just because a trespasser comes in and they want to put their tent up on your lawn, or they want to put a tent in your garage or in your living room, that if you refuse to and you don't cook them a meal and put it on a plate, that you're not compassionate. Maybe that's the wrong thing to do. Maybe if you teach people to do the wrong thing and not be responsible, you might get more of it.
Yeah, exactly.
No resistance.
Well, the question of what this is all about, this whole open the spigot full blast, here's from the same article, this next clip. In related news, Lockheed Martin announced Tuesday that it plans to expand its production of the high mobility artillery rocket system, better known as HIMARS, by more than 50%. The decision follows months of positive publicity for the weapon system, right? Which seems to have sparked increased in interest from governments in Eastern Europe. Everybody wants to buy the HIMARS now. It had its little PR show in Ukraine. It's performing well, so therefore the commercials are out, and they're going to be spending a lot more. We spend for the development and building of it, and then Lockheed Martin reaps the profits.
An interesting study would be for somebody to go and do a little polling in these big companies like this and find out their real opinion and how upset are they about the grocery bills. I think they're probably, getting their cost of living increases, and they're going to be protected, especially the executive branch of these companies. And that, of course, is what they figure that's what they're in business for, and that's how the stock goes up. And it is rather tragic, and we will do our best to continue to expose what we think is evil doing.
Yes. Well, I'm going to close out by, which I haven't done in a while, is asking you to go to ronpaulinstitute.org and subscribe for free updates. We do not sell or rent or loan your information to anyone. It's just between us. But we do provide updates, and I wrote last night about PayPal that I will resend today to the people who subscribe today. And after the show's over, I'll put a link in the description of how you can sign up. And again, we don't know what will happen, so we need to keep in touch. And email is turning out, especially as I keep getting banned from social media for some reason. It turns out to be the best way to keep in touch, at least for now. And I do want to thank everyone who's watching. An easy way to help us is to go ahead and click that plus sign right under the our show. Give us some rumbles. That'll help give us more visibility. It's not that hard to do. Comment on the show, which will help bring it more visibility everywhere. And thanks for helping us keep going.
Very good. And I too want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and we do our very best to find out what's going on a daily basis. Frequently, sometimes we hear something 10 minutes before, and we're really up on things. But it is also difficult to keep up completely. But so far, we've had very favorable responses, and that's what we're here for, because trying to do what the title of our organization said, Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, because I so sincerely believe that is achievable mainly with more liberty, not more government. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.